we can argue back and forth whether or not this is going to make a difference on the border itself, and whether enough people are turned away that they call their friends back home and say, hey, don't come, versus the number of people who get through. Over and over and over again, we're told by voters that the border is an issue in Florida, and it's an issue in North Carolina, it's an issue in Georgia, not because of the border itself, but because the immigrants that are already in their communities and the problems, for lack of a better term, that they're causing. Does this executive action, as you read it, do anything to deal with those issues?
No, I don't think it does. I don't think we're going to hear specifically, for example, how they're going to address the anywhere from 10 to 15 estimated that are already in the country, in the millions, that is, and what the outcome of that is, even though we're hearing rumors and reports of amnesty being given to approximately 350,000 that claimed asylum previously. I think mostly this is going to fall flat with the American people because of everything that you and Kelly have been discussing. Why now, after saying the president didn't have the authority to do any of this? It's amazing what happens and what becomes possible when something becomes a top issue for the upcoming election. I think the American people are going to see through this. So capping over a 1 week period, an average of 5,000, or in a single day, 8,500, and then saying to the American people, trust us, in air quotes, like you referred to earlier, that we'll shut down the border if it gets to this point. I don't think that the administration has a lot of trust equity in the bank right now with the American people on this issue.
Yeah, you think, Kelly, what, we're, in terms of polling, number of people who approve of President Biden's border policies is below freezing level?
I would say that there's, I don't know the exact number.
It's a bipartisan complaint. How about that?
Yeah. There's definitely some, like we saw, Congressman Cuellar has been outspoken on the border, as well as what we said, Democratic Mayor of Eagle Pass not going to this event tomorrow. I was curious if I could ask you, I know we've been talking about, just to zoom out, the election that happened in Mexico and the relationship, what this means for the U.S.-Mexico moving forward. Obviously, we have to work with them to protect and talk about this issue at the U.S.-Mexico border. What do you think of the president doing this announcement 2 days after that election happened? Does that play into this, and what does that mean for the relationship going forward?
Yeah, the time to have this strategy in place, this regional strategy, similar to what President George Bush had in place, the Merida Initiative, what President Obama then expanded beyond Merida. It's too late with 6 months to go at the end of the first term of this president. Why start the diplomacy now? The problem with this administration has always been the appeasement approach in terms of always delivering bundles of cash to countries with no criteria for any benchmarks, any achievements, like removing corruption, slowing down the flow along the migration path. And this extends well past Mexico, well beyond Mexico, down to the Northern Triangle, et cetera. So, to do this now and step up diplomatic efforts because there's a new president is not really another good story for the administration, because it shows that if they were conducting or attempting to conduct diplomacy with President Obrador, they were failing for things like to restore remain in Mexico.
Yeah, look, to be fair, President Trump was pretty successful in getting Mexico through carrots and sticks to clamp down on the number of people coming up through Mexico to the United States. It's the way he slowed the flow of people, not by building a big wall as he promised. Now he's promised to have the massive deportation force, that he's going to start deporting all the people who have come over the past 3 years under President Biden. President Trump's been known for hyperbole. In terms of raw ability, does ICE and DHS have the ability, if President Trump is elected, and forget whether he legally can do it, to actually deport all of these people? Or should we, for lack of a better term, come to the realization that they're most likely, the majority of them most likely, will remain here?
Yeah, let's talk about manpower. CBP and ICE do have the manpower if they're allowed to do the jobs and they're pulled away from missions of processing, for example, things that they have not historically been responsible for.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. Also, don't forget to click that red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.